Hi, my name is Elise Wehle, and I'm the artist who created Through a Corridor of Laurel. For the title, I was actually reading a book called West Portal, which is by a poet who was exploring his grief after the passing of his sister. And in one of his poems, he used the phrase, through a corridor of laurel. And it was something I just jotted down as something that struck out to me and kind of saved for later. And then after I made this artwork, which is very much about part of it being dead, part of it being alive, and all of it resembling this doorway or arched portal that you're passing through. I love the idea of like a corridor of laurel because laurel leaves, at least in ancient Greek culture, symbolized victory. And just this idea that we have these things that we go through where we are losing something. It feels like a part of us is dying. And then, of course, literal death. And then you're passing through this journey, but it's victory on all sides. It's going to end in victory if you can continue passing through the portal of what you're going through. So that was something that I'm so glad I jotted it down, because when I finished this artwork, I was like, that's the title. That's what fits this piece. A lot of times in my art, I'm very fixated with the colors of browns and then colors that bring life with the greens, and juxtaposing those together as showing that life is kind of those two things, always battling it out. That we're constantly going through these little deaths in our lives as we make different changes and transform as people. We're always saying goodbye to something, but something new will always take its place. And in the end, I think we're always grateful that it does. A lot of my plants do come from Utah. Sometimes I kind of cheat the system and I get some pressed plants off of Etsy, and they come from a variety of places just because they have some amazing plants that I don't have access to. I do focus a lot on leaves and perennials and plants that do go through this process of fading in the winter. You think they're goners, and then sure enough, they're back in the spring. So those plants that have that symbolism are really important to me. I probably see the work a little bit differently than someone coming to it for the first time, because when I start an artwork, I always start it with a photograph of a woman, and that's where the entire composition comes from, is from that original photograph. So to me, I see a face, there's an oval there at the top in between the green, there's two hands crossing each other, and then of course there's this vacant area in the middle that the whole thing to me feels like a doorway, but that especially allowing space for one to pass through is very important to me. And then there's this pattern that encompasses this shape, a more delicate geometric pattern, and then it kind of dissolves into these lines that flow down. And then all around that, surrounding it, are these green leaves enveloping the entire composition. I am a sucker for handiwork, so I hope people will notice all the details that went into the artwork, because those are the parts that give me the most pleasure to create as an artist. I love those finicky details and getting them right, and especially when it comes to pattern, which can be so unforgiving because you can notice when it's off. I love trying to get those details right. Not that it's perfect, and that's something I also love, is that it's not perfect. You can tell this came from a human, which in our day and age, I feel like is even more and more of a gift when we have these handmade things around us that we can surround ourselves with. So I hope they'll appreciate those details. And then I hope the artwork just gives overall a feeling of hope. That is what I needed the artwork to be for me, and I hope that's what it can be for other people. For me, when I was creating this artwork, and also with my paper cut artwork, something I was always striving to achieve was a feeling of how it felt to be this eternal soul in this physical body. And I have faith that we are eternal spirits, but we experience everything in this life through a physical lens. And that's something I wanted to capture very much in the artwork, is this feeling of spirituality, of eternity. I try to evoke that with the pattern, with the pose, but then also that's made out of these temporal materials with the plants and these things that we associate with not having a lasting presence, which is how we often feel in this life, because we are mortal and so many things don't last around us, or at least that's how it feels. So that's something I try to capture in the work, is this juxtaposition of the temporal and the eternal all existing together, because that's my daily experience and the daily experience of those around me.